Welcome to Bloodbath and Beyond. Today we're reviewing Saw. How much blood would you shed to stay alive?
Directed by James Wan, starring Leigh Whannell, Cary Elwes, and Tobin Bell, Saw is about two men who wake up in a bathroom with no recollection of how they got there. Soon they realize they are part of a sadistic game. What do we like about this movie? This is pretty much a classic, iconic horror film at this point. At the time it came out, horror was kind of like dying off. There wasn't like anything that was notable. Saw reinvented this genre of horror and made a whole bunch of new fans. And I think that's why, for the $1 million or how much ever they made it on, it did so well, because people were missing the go to the theaters and see a scary movie.
And well, this is not necessarily a torture porn film. It definitely spawned it with its sequels, and this was kind of hinting at that. And it was neat because it's one of those movies that did really well, even though it took place in one location, and it was all a guessing game. And that was part of the fun of this movie. I mean, we have a game, What Would You Do? And basically, this movie was exactly that. It's what would you do in this situation? And as clues are revealed, you're constantly trying to figure it out. That's what made this film so great, and why it is probably one of the most profitable films in horror history.
Yeah, even when you go to describe it, initially I don't even think it was intended to be much of a horror movie. It was much more of a crime drama with crazy elements to it. We had friends who couldn't even watch horror movies, and they would watch this and get blown away by it. It is a really well done movie, and the mystery is top notch.
This movie's been out for about 12 years now, so I think it's safe that I can talk about the ending of this film. So spoilers ahead, if you haven't seen it somehow. The ending is what really made this film great, because it's something that you would have never guessed. Even given all of the clues throughout the film, as you're constantly guessing, there is no way that anybody guessed the end to this film.
They did so well of engrossing us in other elements of the story that when the reveal was there, you're just like, well, fuck me.
And being that this was a one-location film, it was nice that we had a lot of flashbacks, because not only did it give us more backstories to our main characters, but we also were introduced to what is now known as torture porn.
So while I'm sure we can find maybe lesser known films, or even going back to the 80s, but at the time in 2004 when this came out, there was nothing mainstream or known like this. So you get these traps that are just bloody, gruesome, and just awesome. The first one we see is the wire maze. And you're like, what the fuck is going on? He's going through barbed wire, cutting himself up. You don't know much about what the game actually is. But this is our first introduction to it. They're doing the fast, weird cuts.
And it's very reminiscent of things like Seven. It had the same kind of tone when it came to the set design, and just the way that the cops interacted with the scene. I don't know, Seven's one of my favorite films, and it's cool to see the crime investigators handled well in a horror movie, because usually they're dumb as hell.
I think part of that is because you have such an intelligent villain that it allows them to be smarter. I mean, if you had an investigator going after Jason or something, it's pretty straightforward. He's just fucking walking in a path killing people. If a detective couldn't figure that out, he'd be pretty stupid.
And we couldn't leave our likes without mentioning one of the best and most memorable things of this film, the soundtrack. The Saw theme is arguably one of the most known horror soundtracks to this day. And throughout the film, the score was fantastic.
What didn't we like about this movie?
My biggest issue with this film was the acting, unfortunately. The dialogue between the two main leads didn't seem natural, it didn't seem real.
That clock, what about it? It's brand new. So, somebody obviously wanted us to know the time.
And it seems like an indie film that just happened to make it to theaters, and that's exactly what it was.
There wasn't sort of a natural flow to it. It felt stilted and almost like you're reading from a script. It's time for our final thoughts and ratings.
Saw is easily one of the better and most innovative films that I've seen in the last 20 years. It kickstarted the torture porn genre that we now know today, but it's a little more derogatory at this point. And it introduced us to James Wan, one of the best modern horror directors of our generation. I love the whole idea of this film, and it's one of those films that you can watch with your friends and try and figure out what's happening. We're also treated with a ton of cool traps and awesome gore, and it's set up for a ridiculous but great franchise. So I'm gonna give this 4.5 reverse bear traps out of 5.
I absolutely loved this movie the first time I saw it, and I continue to love it to this day. It really elevated the horror genre, I think, to show that you can be suspenseful, you can be scary, but you can also have a really well done story. You have traps, you have the gore, and it led to this explosion of people just wanting to see more and more gore. Maybe we were getting a little tired of it now, but at the time, it was perfect. It's what we needed. There's great philosophical questions that are raised in this movie. There's, I think, overall just a tight piece of work. And yeah, it's an indie film, so probably it suffered a little in the acting, but I think a bigger budget probably would have ruined the movie because they'd be too big for its own good. So I think you have a tight package of a movie that if anyone hasn't seen it, should definitely see. So I'm gonna give this 4.5. I'm gonna need a bigger Saw out of 5.
As always, thank you for watching. Like this video and comment below with your thoughts on Saw. If you haven't seen it for some reason, then you definitely need to see it. There are links in the description where you can find it. I'm sure it's on Netflix. Just go watch it right now because it's a must-see for horror fans. And if this is your first time here on Bloodbath and Beyond, make sure you subscribe to the channel to stay updated with everything Bloodbath and Beyond, of course. It's October. We got like a ton of shit coming your way. So stay tuned.